Good afternoon. I'm Russell Wooldridge, Director of Business Development for DRI International, and I'd like to welcome you to our free webinar series and today's timely topic, active shooter and mass casualty response. For those of you who may not know, DRI International is the nonprofit that helps organizations prepare for and recover from disasters. Founded in 1988, DRI International has more than 15,000 certified individuals in over 100 countries, and 93% of all Fortune 100 companies employ DRI certified professionals. In fact, more individuals are certified by DRI International than all other organizations in our profession combined. In addition to certifying individuals, DRI assesses organizations to determine resilience and offers organizational accreditation as well. We also serve our profession through educational opportunities, including our annual conference, more on that later, regional events, thought leadership, and webinars like this one. Today's webinar, sponsored by Send Word Now, addresses the issue of active shooters and mass casualty response from a crisis management perspective. Today's presentation is from Felipe Denbrock, a supervisory special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Crisis Management Unit. He brings years of professional experience to the table on the sensitive hot-button issue. His presentation features his real-life experiences and actual case studies, including Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, and Sandy Hook. He'll also share with all of you the potential warning signs to look for and teach you about developing a survival mindset in the midst of an active shooter event. Following his remarks, we'll dive into a Q&A session where Felipe will answer some of the questions you submitted during the registration period. You can also post any additional questions you may have during the presentation in the question box on the lower right side of your screen. Felipe will answer those as well, and his responses will be available when the complete webinar is posted to our website. After the Q&A, please stay tuned for a special presentation of Run, Hide, Fight, an instructional video on active shooter response recommended by Felipe. It is a production of the City of Houston Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security, funded by a grant from the Department of Homeland Security. Attendees who have called into the webinar by telephone will not be able to access the audio portion of this video. To ensure best audio quality, we ask that everyone in the audience please mute your microphone, clicking the box in the upper right-hand side of your screen. Now let's get started. Special Agent Denbrock.
Thank you, Russell. Today we'll be talking about active shooter and mass casualty response from the crisis management perspective. The FBI got involved in active shooter events following the tragic events that took place in December of 2012 at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. The President reached out to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice reached out to the FBI to get heavily involved and engage in finding solutions, proactive solutions, on how to stop the series of active shooter events and mass casualty events throughout the United States. Prior to that, the Bureau was involved in active shooter events more through research, and the research basis through our behavioral analysis units. But most of the research done prior to 2013 was done through the U.S. Secret Service and the Department of Education. The four objectives that we're going to have for this presentation will be, first, to recall the historical overview of the mass shooting events. Number two, we'll be identifying characteristics of an active shooter. Number three, developing a plan on how to respond in an active shooter incident. And number four, preparing for law enforcement response. If we have to go back with a historical perspective on when all this craziness began, we go back to the incident that took place right before the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, California. This took place in an active shooter event in a McDonald's restaurant in San Ysidro, California. On July 18 of 1984, there were 21 killed and 19 injured. Moving right along, the second one of significance was the one at Luby's Cafeteria in Kyling, Texas. Kyling has the dubious distinction that have 3 active shooting incidences in the last 35 years. But this one took place in 1991, where we had killed 23 and 20 injured. Following that, The next significant event was Columbine High School, April 20th, 1999. We had 13 killed and 24 injured. An interesting thing is, to this point, the doctrine in law enforcement was for regular police officers to respond to an active shooter event and secure the perimeter waiting for tactical units. Research post-Columbine highlighted that that's not a very wise approach to take. And since then, the doctrine in law enforcement has changed to the point now that as soon as an active shooter incident or mass casualty incident takes place, everybody responds, and it's one general response between tactical officers and uniform officers. The next one, we're talking about All Tech Momentum Securities, which took place in Atlanta, Georgia, back in the summer of 1999, where 12 were killed and 22 injured. Following that, we're looking at the Fulton County Courthouse on March 11th of 2005, 4 killed. Among them, the judge, the paralegal, and the deputy sheriff. Following that was 2016, the one with the highest casualty rate, the one that took place at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. That took place in April 16, 2007. We have 32 killed, 17 injured. And it took place in 2 different attacks within 2 hours of each other. Again, like I mentioned earlier during the shooting at Fort Hood in Kyleen, Texas in 2009, where we have 12 killed and 30 injured. The significant event was the Safeway grocery store shop in Tucson, Arizona. This particular event was where Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot, and we had 6 killed and 19 injured. One of the interesting things about these particular ones was the response from EMS. They took cues from the military response due to our deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they conducted mass casualty. And this document is one of the first times where tourniquets were used in this type of setting. Moving along, there is the Batman movie premiere. It took place in the Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. We're looking at 12 killed, 58 injured. Following that, we have the Sika Temple in Wisconsin in August 2012, where 7 were killed and 4 injured. And the one after that, we're looking at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut, where we have 27 killed and 2 injured. The next one, which was very close to us here to the FBI, was the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. That took place in September 16, 2013. We had 13 killed and 14 injured. The next one after that, we had Fort Hood, Texas, and Kyleen, Texas, on April 2nd, 2014, with 3 killed and 16 injured. And then there was a Jewish community center in Overland Park, Kansas, on April 13, 2014, with 3 people killed. In my experience, many times people ask, what is the profile of the active shooter? So I ask people, what is the profile of the active shooter? And people come up with answers such as, he's a white male, he's a loner. The only thing he does is play video games. He has a strained relationship with his parents, all sorts of things. And as you see here, there is no profile for an active shooter. They can be male and female, and race does not play an issue. It could be anybody. Now, in the research conducted by the FBI, the Secret Service, and the Department of Education, and private entities throughout the United States, the research has shown that there has always been pre-attack indicators prior to these shootings. One thing that we have to be cognizant of is that people need to be aware of their surroundings, need to be aware of what people around them are doing, and be conscious of their behaviors and how they change. They display behaviors during pre-attack planning. These are known as predatory behaviors. And if you're familiar with the person or the offender, you will be able to pinpoint him. One of the things that I want to make people aware of is with the emergence of social media, a lot of people tend to display these feelings through social media. So be aware that social media can be an ally to you professionals in the field. Now let's talk about some of the pre-attacking behaviors, pre-attack indicators. The first thing that happens is they develop a grievance, whether it's real or perceived. Next thing is a contextually inappropriate and recent acquisition of multiple weapons. And not only that, they take those weapons and they practice. They go to the range. So if you see a worry where someone starts showing this type of behavior, you need to make somebody aware. The next thing, they develop an interest in proud responses from law enforcement regarding how they responded to the scene and regarding issues with IEDs and explosives. Now, one of the things that we notice is that they do their homework. They do a lot of research regarding past mass casualty events. And in many cases, they try to up the last one. One of the things we have worked with the media on is to prevent that when these issues emerge, that we don't mention the name of the perpetrator, as to not create a sense of martyrdom. I'm going to do this so I can be remembered, if you can think of it like that. So they do a very thorough job researching past mass casualty events. Now, these pre-attack indicators, like I mentioned earlier, they deal with a significant or real or perceived loss. And that is the trigger. It could be, again, the more you try to analyze it, it doesn't make any sense because some of them are only perceived. But it's always a trigger. And it could be the case that the signs manifest weeks and months before, prior to the major event. And it could be something like a breakup, a divorce, a loss of job, somebody picking on them. So again, be aware of those pre-attack indicators that are always going to be there. So to break it down, first is the sense of a significant real or perceived personal loss in the weeks leading up to the event. And that loss could be something that's death, breakup, divorce, loss of a job, or they have been bullied, or whatever. So they develop that grievance. The next step that takes place is the ideation. I got this idea. The next step after that, number 3, the pathway to violence. The third one is the research and planning. The next step would be the preparation. The number 5 would be the breach, in which the person says, I'm ready to do this. I'm going to do it. And the last and final step is the attack. And social media plays an important part in your mitigating. Use social media as a mitigating factor to identify this early on. Many active shooters have been described as social isolates. They harbor feelings of hate and anger. However, few of them have been reported with prior arrest for violent crimes. Now, believe it or not, schools in the United States are safer than ever before. Using the model of the New York City Police Department, we encourage people to be aware of their surroundings, and if they see something or hear something, to say something. Somebody has to know how to report these type of issues to supervisors, to HR, or to legal. If it's in a private industry, if it's in a government agency, their supervisor, their security officer. You must say something. The days prior where we didn't get involved because it's none of our business, those days don't exist anymore. We've got to be keenly aware of what's going on around us. Now let's talk about active shooter statistics. Back in the 2014-15 timeframe, the FBI conducted the most thorough study on active shooters. And you can find the study if you go to the FBI website. Under the search link, look for active shooter. And you can even download the booklet, a study on active shooting incidents in the United States between 2000 and 2013. What we're looking at in the past 13 years for 2000 to 2013, we had 160 incidents, which was an average of 11.4 incidents per year. The number of casualties during those 13 years was 1,043. Out of 1,043, 486 were killed, 557 were wounded. If you rank the statistics, it's even more per year. 49% of the time, the incidents, the active shooter incidents, or mass casualty incidents, ends before the police arrive. 40% of the time, civilians stop the attacks themselves. And only 10% of the time, the attackers walk away. 41% of the time, the active shooter kills themselves. 57% of the time, the police complete a solo entry, by which I mean having a patrol officer respond to a scene, he goes in. And again, that's a change from what I mentioned earlier today, and not what took place in Columbine in 1999, where they're waiting for tactical teams. In this case, the police are now comprehensively going in. If you have one or two, it's better than having none at all. 75% of the time, police use force to stop the threat. In 33% of those incidents, police were shot. Now, an interesting thing, during active shooter scenarios, 30% of the incidents took place in less than 5 minutes, and in 63% of the times ended in less than 15 minutes. The only time where this was different was during the Navy Yard shooting in Washington, D.C., where the guy took close to an hour and a half walking around the hallway. That's the only time where it took longer than an hour. 37% of the time, the suspected active shooter broadcast his intention ahead of the incident. Again, this is where taking a look to the social media platforms that they use will give you a good idea of what's going on with the person. 60% of the time, the active shooter had a handgun. 27% of the time, the active shooter used a rifle. 39% of the time, the active shooter used multiple weapons, edged weapons or guns. 2% of the time, the active shooter had an improvised explosive device. 17% of the time, the active shooter event actually took place outside. Now, all the research has shown to us the following. The biggest surprise is in 74% of all these incidents, the active shooter walked through the front door of the particular business or enterprise where they were. Now, from now on, we tell you to just follow your company's policy. I can tell you that what the Coca-Cola company does is different than what UPS does, or for what 3M is doing. So be aware of their internal policy for the company. Now, in order to train, the suggestions that we're having when we train companies in America is teach people to have a plan. In this particular slide, you will see this. Having a plan triggers your body and your mind to create a survival mindset. If you think ahead of time, anywhere you go, be aware of your surroundings. That's having a plan. If you have a critical incident, okay, where are the exits? Where are the stairs? Where is the kitchen? Using that as an example, my wife and I were both FBI agents, and we had told our daughter from a very young age, wherever you go, be aware of your surroundings. Again, that's developing a plan. Have a plan. And we're going to show in this slide and the next one how the difference of responses dictates what happens. When you have a plan and a critical incident takes place, the feeling is going to be the same. You're going to be startled. You have fear. You're going to have a trained response because you already thought ahead of time. What is it that I'm going to do? You're going to be anxious. And that quick millisecond that you're going to be anxious, you're also going to have to recall, oh yeah, I thought about what I'm going to do. And then you do the next step, which is prepare, and then the last one is to act. Now, when you don't have a plan, you literally have the same reaction as before, which is you have the startle and fear, and then fear just starts grabbing you, and you have an untrained response. You start acting sort of like what we call in my business the chicken movements. You go to the left, you go to the right, back and forth, and you cannot make a decisive choice. You're starting to get fear, emotions that overwhelm you. Then panic sets in, disbelief. The fact that you start thinking, oh, I can't believe this is happening to me. And then it follows to denial, which is, this is not happening to me. You must deny your helplessness or you will literally give up. So again, it's part of you having a plan, and it starts with being aware of your surroundings. By having a plan, you develop that survival mindset that we mentioned earlier. What am I talking about? We're talking about get out, hide out, take out, run, hide, and fight. Having a plan is also having the ability to train your people in your building and your company and your enterprise on response options. Be able to train 911. Keep that sense of calm for that critical incident. Call 911 and provide details on what's going on. And as security professionals and business continuity professionals in having a realistic security assessment, what is vulnerable in your company? What makes your company vulnerable to an active shooter attack? Is it an outsider threat or is it an insider threat? Keep in mind those things. Again, have a plan and have people take part. Some companies that I've been through have floor monitors where they identify multiple evacuation routes, and they practice these evacuations. What is a good way to practice evacuations? People don't know they're doing it when you do fire drills. Designate shelter locations. Designate point of contacts with knowledge of the facility and the security procedures. And I like to add on this particular slide, have a place where you're going to have a reunification point. Make sure this reunification point is secure for all personnel. The next one is conduct evacuation drills. An invisible drill. Moving right along, run. When we're talking about running on the run, hide, and fight, it means evacuating. If it's feasible, evacuate the facility. They should leave all personal belongings. Second thing I like to highlight on the run, visualize your escape route. You have a primary route and a secondary route, and to some extent, a tertiary route. And last but not least, avoid using elevators and escalators. On hide, if evacuation is not possible, the building occupant should hide in a secure area. What I'm telling you now is an exercise in common sense. And it's simple and it works. But guess what happens when a critical incident happens? Common sense goes out the window. And this is for you as a business continuity planner. You need to be aware that common sense goes out the window. You need to be patient and highlight these issues to your people as you move forward. So when we talk about hiding, use a shelter area. Lock the door. Again, it's an exercise in common sense. You can't believe how many people, when we had full-scale exercises or exercises in buildings, they forget to lock the area. Barricade it with heavy furniture. Cover windows. Turn off the lights. Line the floor. Remain silent. So be aware of those things. Fight. This is the last resort because either evacuation isn't working or hiding options are minimal. The best thing I can tell you is this. Use aggressive force and use the objects in your environment to help you out. Something like scissors, fire extinguishers, chairs. Now let's talk about what happens during and after the event. Your actions will influence others. Stay calm as much as possible. Be aware that the cavalry, and when I mean the cavalry, law enforcement is coming. And when I say law enforcement, I mean fire, EMS, and I can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to have the FBI, DEA, Marshals, ATF, the state law enforcement agencies, the local law enforcement agencies, and people from law enforcement from 50 miles away. The cavalry is coming. Now, attempts to rescue people should only be considered if it can be done without endangering others. So remember, the safety of the masses before the safety of the few. Another thing that you're going to notice, and we have seen, call 911. But be aware that when a critical incident like this takes place, 911 assistance is going to be hard to connect to. My suggestions would be do some engagement with your local police department. And many of the agencies nowadays are able to take texting from 911. So check with your jurisdiction to see if this is possible. Remember, when law enforcement responds, their goal is not to treat the injured. Their goal is to identify the threat and neutralize it. Therefore, when they go in, it's going to be a very charged situation. A lot of adrenaline is going to go through you and through the people responding to the on-scene responders. Here again is an exercise in common sense and things that you should not do. Do not yell, scream, wave arms, or make any sudden movements. Do not hold anything in your hands that can be misconstrued as a weapon, and that includes cell phones. When you get instructions to move, move and show your empty hands. Some departments, I can tell you, departments like the Atlanta Police Department, they have instructed the people in the city of Atlanta to put your hands on top of your head, and everyone is going to be searched. So be aware of that. Last but not least, the FBI, we do a lot of stuff with the regular regiment and the military unit. One of the things that we had learned with them is that they do a lot of after-action reviews. And they go with the attitude of, okay, what did we learn? And what can we do to improve? I want you guys to see when you establish this in your enterprise. Take that attitude. What did we learn? What can we do to improve? It is shown, especially what I did in Atlanta, that when you start with, it's your fault and this is not working, and get blame and take blame, that doesn't help anybody. So be positive about it and take the attitude of, what can we do to improve? Now, for security professionals and business continuity, if you have a pretty good plan, a very robust plan, be cocky about it. What I mean about being cocky is invite people from your jurisdiction to take a look at it. And if you can convince your management, exercise the plan, and learn where the gaps are, and based on those gaps, make the necessary adjust fire, as we call it. Adjust fire to make it work for you and your company. Also be aware that some people are going to give you some criticism. They're going to give you criticism you may not like. By default, you will have to develop some thick skin. And the third one I also suggest is liaison, and more liaison. Establish a relationship with your local jurisdiction police department, the same with your state partners and with your federal partners. Establish a relationship with the FBI active shooter liaison. It goes a long way. And let me tell you why. Because I've worked crisis management. If you were to have an incident in your company, we will need you there because you know your company. You know your culture. We're going to need you there to be part of the decision-making process, along with, of course, the CEO of the company or the manager. But you will be there. And last but not least, the last place you want to exchange business cards is in a crisis situation.
Thank you, Felipe. Before we go into the Q&A, here's a brief word from this webinar's sponsor, Send Word Now.
I'd like to take this opportunity to briefly introduce you all to Send Word Now. With offices in New Jersey and London, and founded after the tragedy of September 11th, Send Word Now is the leading worldwide provider of critical communication solutions for the enterprise. We offer web-based and mobile emergency notification solutions that are deployed by businesses, government agencies, universities, and nonprofit organizations of all sizes. We ensure fast, effective communications when it's needed the most. Our enterprise-class notification service is capable of transmitting tens of thousands of voice and text messages in minutes, while providing a full audit trail for after-action reporting and follow-up. It is designed to reach anyone, anywhere, anytime, with any device over any type of connection. We are proud and honored to be a highly awarded company in service. Just to highlight a few of our accolades, we have been on the Inc. 5000 list for 9 consecutive years. We were awarded Notification System of the Year by DRI International and recently received the BCI Innovation of the Year Award and the CIR Cloud Services Provider of the Year Award. I would like to briefly highlight some of our features and how they can help improve your response in the event of emergency, whether that emergency is a man-made threat or a natural disaster. With our alerting service, you can easily send alerts to thousands of recipients within minutes through virtually any communication device. Just to name a few, you can send through mobile and landline phones, email, SMS, desktop alerts, and our SWN Direct mobile app. You can receive feedback in real time, and you can track and record activity for auditing purposes. SWN Direct is our mobile app for alert recipients. By alert recipients, I mean your employees or other key stakeholders. SWN Direct allows you to securely send text alerts, voice notifications, and digital files to mobile devices without the expense and limitations of traditional messages. SWN Direct has a variety of features within the app itself. To mention a couple, it utilizes IP networking. You do not have to rely on third-party lines to deliver messages. It also does not restrict character limits because it is not SMS. The app has secure encrypted file storage and transfer capabilities, which allows your contacts to access files when they need to, no matter where they are. It also has a conference calling feature that allows you to set up conference calls that bypass traditional conference lines. We are coming into another inclement weather season, and this next feature has proven to be invaluable for our customers. It's our Weather Blast feature. It automatically generates and delivers notifications as severe weather patterns are detected within 5 square miles. It can also be set up to send alerts with no human intervention, and you can customize call to actions like take shelter. Your organization can't control the weather, but you can be prepared for its consequences. So, no matter when, how, or why you need to get a message out, Send Word Now has the features and capabilities to deliver your important alerts anytime and anywhere.
Now, let's tackle some of the questions from our listeners. So let's get started with our first question. For organizations now forming a cohesive violent intruder plan, how do you best communicate and train your employees without overly alarming them? Can you suggest any best practice for implementation?
Does your organization have an employee advisory board? If so, I found them to be very reliable by having a finger on the pulse as to the latest within an organization. Meet with them, get involved, and seek their feedback. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
Next question. What are today's industry best practices on informing students or employees using crisis communication software? Is there any concern with communicating or setting off too many personal devices at one time?
To be honest, I'm not familiar with such concerns. The key is to get the information out as soon as possible.
How do you determine whether to get out or to lock down? Is locking down sometimes safer than getting out?
Depends on the person. Some people choose to stay, some to get out. Personally, my advice is that the situation and other factors at the time of the critical incident will dictate the best course of action for that particular person.
What's one thing that employees can share with their families on what to do if there's an active shooter outside the workplace?
Well, A, situational awareness at all times. Be on the lookout for exits, elevators, stairs, and places to hunker down if the need arises. B, trust your instincts. C, do something. Seek shelter or run. And D, remain calm. Do not let panic take over.
There was a toxic substance exercise that you were involved in at Turner Broadcasting in 2012. What do you think are now the greatest threats to employee safety, and what steps should we take to assess and prepare for those threats on site?
Well, two threats: feeling complacent and the lack of effective communication across horizontal vertical spectrum among organizations. The key is how to recognize how far your organization is willing to involve employees in the organic response to a critical incident. Does TBS have an employee advisory board? If so, take advantage and get involved in the planning and execution process.
If the event occurs in an open market or a shopping mall or an open space of some type, how do the police communicate to the business owners during the incident?
It varies from venue to venue. Some agencies have a very robust program in place, and some others, due to funding, do not. I suggest you contact your local law enforcement agency to establish a liaison. They will love to hear from you.
What are some of the key indicators of an organization's vulnerability to such threats, for example, health institutions?
Take a look at your BC plan. Meet the necessary stakeholders and be honest about the gaps within your organization in regards to a critical incidents response. Health institutions have several organic employee advisory boards. Seek their input.
In the recent past, we have seen more attacks using vehicles, edged weapons, as opposed to firearms. In your opinion, is this a trend which is likely to continue? How can we better prepare or counter such attacks on an individual basis?
Yes, the threat is evolving, and the best advice I can give you is expect the unexpected.
Were there any kind of family assistance centers set up in the aftermath of the shootings where families could go and get information and support? What role did public health play in these events?
Yes, so centers were set up to assist families in public safety. In regards to the role of the public health, this varies from city to city. The best response I've seen was in Orlando, where public safety, other government agencies, OGAs, the private sector, and non-government agencies, NGAs, came together to help the wounded, their families, public safety, public health, and their citizens.
So now for some additional questions and answers. The first group of questions all fall into the staff training and executive buy-in subject areas. What is the best way to have a live simulation without causing pandemonium among your employees?
Well, first, if you have one, I would get your company's employee advisory board involved in the decision-making process and seek their input. It can also help generate excitement. If you don't have one, reach out to human resources, facilities personnel, or any other department that could be part of the simulation. Second, of course, involve your business continuity people. And third, establish a partnership with your local law enforcement agency, since they'll be able to provide additional resources and support. And finally, fourth, establish your course of action.
What is the best method to conduct an active shooter tabletop exercise?
The most important thing is to develop a straightforward set of objectives for the exercise. That begins with establishing active participants, establish who needs to be involved and why.
Then what's the best way to get your C-suite involved?
As far as communicating to executive levels why this training is important, you can position active shooter training as a value-added strategy to improve the overall welfare of all the employees.
How important is it for an organization to have a threat assessment team in place to vet potential internal threats?
In this case, when we talk about threat assessment team or TAT, we're talking about those within human resources, corporate security, business continuity, and particularly those who've gone through threat assessment training. And I would argue that it's critical. Sometimes they're the only line of defense.
Should companies consider a designated concealed carry personnel per floor?
Your legal department will have the best answer, since that will vary by state laws, corporate culture, and other case-by-case factors.
Now let's shift to the issue of mass notification and use of cell phones. What are today's industry best practices on informing employees, students, interested parties using crisis communication software, mass-comm, or push-to-talk devices? Is there any concern with communicating and setting off many personal devices at one time?
I recommend using mass communication software to inform your people as soon as you can. The more people who know, and the quicker they know, the more lives can be saved.
Now, we have a batch of questions that are directly related to the Run, Hide, Fight, follow-up to the Run, Hide, Fight presentation from the Houston Police Department. How do you determine whether to get out versus lock down? Sometimes locking down is safer than getting out, according to your own remarks.
Yeah, I received a few questions asking for advice for very specific situations such as this, or what to do in a high-rise office tower, or what to do in a shopping mall facility, whether to run first or call 911. And unfortunately, I can't give you a step-by-step guide for every scenario. I can only tell you that each individual situation dictates the actions taken. Not least of which because every person involved is going to react differently during a crisis situation.
During the recovery phase of active shooter, what happens after the event? How can we assist our employees, contractors, and visitors with regard to such a scenario?
Establish a relationship with the FBI Victim Assistance Coordinator near you. They have real-life experiences dealing with these matters, and they'll be glad to assist you or make suggestions for your plan.
How does on-site security interface with public officers during an active shooter issue? Who's in charge?
Corporate security and public safety work together. At the end, your security knows your location better than anyone else. As for who is in charge, if law enforcement is responding to your location, then law enforcement is in charge until the threat has been eliminated and law enforcement operations are completed.
One of our questions comes from a member of an international organization's security team. Most of the scenarios we've discussed today are in a domestic context. What would you advise to those who work in overseas environments?
It changes very little. The only thing that changes in an overseas environment is it in a permissive or a non-permissive environment? You usually have very involved lenient security services and public safety. They know what to do with years of experience responding to terrorism. But that may not be the case in a non-permissive environment.
Do you have anything add or new to suggest in light of the recent attacks at the Manchester concert or London Bridge in the UK?
Well, the recent attacks in the UK is another reminder that everyone should work to increase their sense of situational awareness for yourself, for your family, for your employees. Be aware of world events, familiarize yourself with new surroundings as you enter them. Be alert to potential changes as they happen, and so forth.
Thanks again to our presenter, Special Agent Felipe Denbrock, for a powerful and informative presentation. Before we show the Run, Hide, Fight video, I'd like to invite you to join us at DRI 2018, our next annual conference coming to Nashville, Tennessee, February 11th through 14th, 2018. At the conference, you'll hear more of this and other important issues facing the business continuity community presented by carefully selected, experienced subject matter experts. Presentations range from real-world case studies to lively discussions to engage the audience. Registration for DRI 2018 will open later this summer in August. For more information, visit driconference.org. To conclude this presentation, here is Run, Hide, Fight, Surviving an Active Shooter Event, an instructional video produced by the City of Houston Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security. As a reminder, webinar attendees participating via telephone will not be able to access the audio portion of this presentation. This video is presented with permission of the Houston Mayor's Office.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. as a last resort, if your life is at risk. Whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
If you still have questions we didn't cover, give us a call at 866-542-3744. A recording of this and all other webinars are posted on my DRI. Please be aware that for professional reasons, Special Agent Denbrock's voice was replaced by voice talent. I'm Russell Wooldridge. This webinar has been a production of DRI International 2017, all rights reserved. Thank you for your attention.